Welcome to another Hexachords tutorial. I'm Benjamin, and in this video I'll be doing a detailed overview of how to use plugins with Orb Composer. Choose a template. First, let's take a look at a template. In this case, we'll choose the strings template. By default, if you build a track using Orb Composer, it will use a piano sound for all of your work done in Orb Composer software. If this is sufficient for you to get an idea of what the track will sound like per your workflow, in other words, you don't need it to sound good in Orb and you're just using it as a reference to put into your own DAW for orchestration, then you can leave all instruments to use the default Orb piano. However, if your goal is to get Orb Composer to sound good and export the sound directly from Orb as a final track, then there is a lot you'll need to do, particularly for orchestra and string templates that require you to map articulations. You can see a link in the description to the full mapping of Orb Composer MIDI outputs. First, let's set up the Violins 1 by clicking on Violin 1 in the instrument list on the left. Mapping articulations. As you can see, when we open this up, we are brought to the Plugins Mapping Settings screen. This is the screen that will enable us to import any instruments we need to Orb Composer to use. For strings and orchestra templates, every instrument has a multitude of articulations which Orb will attempt to use during its composing process. Let's first fold them all so we can see all the articulations we need to map, and then we'll map them one at a time. To do this, click the Fold All button in the top right corner next to the VST Explorer text. As you can see, there are 14 articulations that need to be loaded just for Violins 1. What if I'm missing some samples? If you don't have the necessary samples in your library for all of the samples that Orb Composer will attempt to use when writing, there are 4 possible workarounds. Number 1, go out and buy a sample library that has all of these articulations. One such library is Spitfire Symphonic Strings. Second, and a less costly alternative, is to instead just leave those articulations out by not adding a plugin for them, and if you so desire, turn off the Orb piano as well. This will not stop Orb from picking that articulation when writing, but when you see that Orb has selected it, you can go into the clip settings and simply change to an articulation you know you have and would prefer to use. Another alternative is to simply use an articulation you have already used for something else. For example, Pitz Bartok, you can easily just use any pizzicato you do have at your disposal and ignore this specialty articulation. The final alternative is to layer sounds. For instance, let's say you don't really have a marcato attack sound in your library options. What you can do instead is, in Contact, load in 2 sounds, a long sound and a staccato or spiccato sound to add an attack to the front of it. While this won't be a true marcato attack, it should suffice as an alternative you can edit later in your DAW of choice. Do note that most string or orchestra libraries include at least longs, marcato, pizzicato, legato, col legno, and tremolo. The others on the list are more specialty articulations that are rarely used even by the elite composers in their works. Adding effects plugins. Adding effects plugins is very similar to how you add instruments, except that they go in the effects side and not the instrument side, and these can be found in the top right under the effects button here. Depending on what you're planning to do with your instrument, you can add any effects you wish. I'm not aware if there's a limit to the number of effects you can add to a single instrument, or for that matter, a limit to how many VST or audio units you can add, but it's worth noting that I rarely use more than 1 or 2. For instance, we'll add reverb to our strings. Audio and buffer settings. There is a new menu in Orb Composer S for defining sound output settings and choosing the sample rate and hertz of your project. This is an important thing to set right. Set your samples too high, and your latency will have a really long delay in listening, but set it too low, and you'll run into issues with cutouts. I suggest somewhere between 1024 and 2048 for optimal latency and for the least amount of cutting out issues. This number may vary based on your PC settings and your project size. Orchestral projects will often require more buffer samples than a simple piano track, for instance. Hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, give us a like. And if you want to get your copy of Orb Composer, click the Buy Now button on the screen. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. And you can also join our Discord community by clicking the link in the description. Thanks for watching.